Welcome back to Books in Review. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
Well, we're going to be reviewing today the 1955 Holy Week, a short critical study, and Your Excellency, you were cited as one of the inspirations for this pamphlet.
Yes, I was. Yes, I only wrote one thing about the change of the Good Friday prayer for the Jews, so I really didn't contribute a lot to it, but I appreciate.
It's a great title of that article, Your Excellency. It's called Genuflecting to the Jews.
Yes, I did write that.
And you had a chance to read this, and you had said that you had learned a few things. And I'm always impressed when a pamphlet's able to teach you. You've had a few years in the priesthood, Your Excellency, so I figure you've had a lot of time to study things. So, what were some of those few things that you'd learned?
I can't recall right now. Just some details of the role of Bugnini in it, and just the whole formation of the new Holy Week, and especially the comments of Monsignor Gromier, who was an official in the Vatican, a liturgical official in the Vatican, and he said a lot of very, very enlightening things, and analyzed very carefully the changes that Bugnini made. And so that was a big contribution to the effort, I think, in regard to. See, these things are hard to find. See, there's not one single book that says this is how we did the new Holy Week. You have to go to little bits and pieces to get the whole picture. And no, it was enlightening, especially those comments.
If some of our watchers and listeners are wondering who Bugnini is, you have to realize that His Excellency insists on that pronunciation for Bugnini. So when you hear it, don't be distressed. It's the same person.
Well, it's an anglicized version of it, Bugnini.
We could call it the Reading pronunciation, perhaps.
Yes, I think it fits very nicely.
So this was written by Father Olivier Rioult and was translated from the French into English by Shield of Faith Press. And it starts the introduction, "Are we dispensed from celebrating the Holy Week reformed under Pius XII?" The first answer that comes to mind would be negative. Indeed, Pius XII reformed the Holy Week at the request of many liturgists. And while in 1951 the celebration of Easter Vigil by night was only authorized as an experiment, in 1955 he made it mandatory with all the reforms of the rite. There are nonetheless very serious reasons that allow us to answer this question positively, and among them this admission of Paul VI. This renewal has also shown clearly that the formulas of the Roman Missal ought to be revised and enriched. The beginning of this renewal was the work of our predecessor, this same Pius XII, in the restoration of the Paschal Vigil and of the Holy Week rite, which formed the first stage of updating the Roman Missal for the present-day mentality.
Yes, so that's the big argument against using it, and that is that it certainly contains elements that led to the Novus Ordo. There's no doubt.
It's pretty condemning, actually, for Paul VI to say that this new Holy Week formed the first stage of updating the Roman Missal for the present-day mentality.
Yes.
Are you saying that you don't want to be part of updating the Roman Missal for the present-day mentality?
No, I don't want to be part of that at all. No, and Bugnini said back in 1955, and I have the book on my shelf, he said that this is a bridge to future reforms of the liturgy. And as Father Cicada, in his inimitable way, said, if you don't want to get to the other side, why would you cross the bridge?
Right.
And it's a perfect argument. The point is that we can see things in hindsight now that would not have been evident at the time in 1955. He was a reigning pontiff in 1955. He wanted this to be done. Everybody did it. If I had been a priest at that time, I would have done it too.
Although there were plenty of priests who asked for exceptions.
Yes. But the general, it was just, this comes down from the Pope and we do it, whether you liked it or not. And that was obedience.
Sounds like authority, sounds like hierarchy, how the church is constituted.
Yes. But in the meantime, we've had the new Mass and all of the horrors of Vatican II. So in hindsight, we see that this was done in order to prepare little by little the clergy for what was coming. See, they knew that Pius XII wasn't going to live forever. As a matter of fact, these things were done when he was sick with the hiccups. So there's a little doubt there about who was running the church. It may have been Montini.
Cardinal Bea.
Montini was in that, and Bea was talking to Pius XII, etc. And Pius XII had a great admiration for science and research. I would say excessive, but he was dazzled by any kind of scientific thing. He once, in commenting about Sputnik, he said, "Imagine a satellite traveling around the Earth. It's like a miracle." And when I read that, I thought, that's kind of an odd thing to say. It's not a miracle at all. It's just physics,
Right.
But he loved to drive fast. In Munich, he loved to fly around, in the airplanes and all. He had a sort of admiration for the modern world and for science, technology, research.
And you're not saying that in itself is a problem.
No, but I could see how he could give ear to these modernists who would approach him and say, this is more traditional, and this is this, and this is this, and we should go back to the early church, and
We should have a new Psalter.
yeah, we should have a new Psalter, etc. I think he had a weakness for that. He was a very, very good student as a young person, but he did go to secular colleges and secular education, and in certain cases, the Sapienza, for example, which had fallen into the hands of the Garibaldaists and all that. So he knew professors and so forth for whom he had an admiration, but who were not exactly the best Catholics. So that's his background, and so I'm not. It wouldn't change what you would have had to do in 1955. You might say, "Gosh, this is awful, but I have to do it."
If you had been a priest at that time,
Yes, and if I had been somewhat attentive to what was going on with the liturgical movement and who Bugnini was, and et cetera. But as time went on, we see it's like a weed, a tiny weed growing in your garden, and then it becomes enormous and takes over all the flowers. You say, well, maybe we should pull out the weed. In other words, the original problem was this weed. It's something like that it was a foot in the door. And it's not to say that it was an evil rite or anything like that. It's just to say that you can see things inserted in it that were meant to prepare for the future reform, such as facing the people.
Yes, I think that's part of what's disturbing. And it's not a long pamphlet. You can read it on a flight or in the afternoon, that the changes are they're so dramatic and they're so jarring, but you would only know that if you'd experienced the old Holy Week. If you grow up going to the new Holy Week, you just think it's a bit strange because it's unlike the rest of the liturgy.
I did.
Whereas I think those of us who attend the traditional Mass now, and when we enter in the Holy Week, it is different from the liturgy, but it's because it's so old. The Holy Week liturgy has things that we don't do anymore.
Benedict XIV, who wrote a whole tract on the Mass, he said that the rites of Holy Week are very ancient. So again, you had these liturgists who had sort of rose-colored glasses with regard to various things that were done in the early church, and which fell into desuetude because, for various reasons, maybe they were a bad idea. That happens. The church is not infallible with regard to prudence. In other words, for example, there was communion in the hand in the early church. St. Augustine talks about it. That fell into desuetude because it was not a good idea because of sacrilege. Also, receiving under both species, because of spillage, they did away with that. So you can't go back to the early church and say we're going to do everything the way it was done and ignore the progress that was made with regard to both the theological progress and liturgical progress, doing things better than we did them before. See, that makes no sense.
His Holiness articulates this in Mediator Dei. You can't just go back and say, well, it's of apostolic origin, so we should do it that way.
Right. The church progresses in that. It's a true progression, and it does things better and better as time goes on. And it learns from its own mistakes. And when I say mistakes, I mean certain things that were not the best idea, or it could have been done better. That's because the church is not protected from imprudence as far as what would be the for example. Permitting the Chinese missile in the 1600s.
Well, you always dislike allowing nomination of bishops to the civil authority, Your Excellency.
Yes, you see, that could be prudent or imprudent.
If the civil authorities are Catholic.
Yes, and many times those things were done when the civil authorities were Catholic. But then Napoleon, who should have been a Freemason if he wasn't, is naming bishops in France. You see, and so that affected the French clergy all the way through. And he's the monarch of France. So. It's something like a wine. Wine gets better in the bottle, and so does the liturgy grow and get better as it goes on. For example, the Roman offertory, what we have in the traditional masses, the offertory, was borrowed from the Gallican, that means the French liturgy. All you had in Rome was the bare bones secret prayer for the offertory.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's all you had. Everybody regarded the Roman Rite as a stripped down,
Austere.
Yes, the Greeks thought it was that, because the Greeks are very, very effusive, and
sure.
and the Gallic, but a lot of it was drawn from the Gallican rites, and so there is a development, a legitimate development. What modernism does is that it wants to see development where there should not be, say like in dogma, and there's change in dogma. They want to see evolution, you might say, where there should not be, and refuses development where there should be. And things that are purely human. I mean, the church, these are human laws that are made by the church, and they as I said, can be prudent or not prudent according to the reigning Roman pontiff.
Well, I think the classic example for me, Your Excellency, is the 1917 code referring to ways that you might communicate with your superior. Well, that was before email. That was before the widespread use of technology.
Yes.
So obviously that could be things that evolve over time. Maybe you wouldn't necessarily have to send a telegram or a certified letter. You could send an email or something like that.
You could. Yes. Times change. And also, for example, the Council of Trent suppressed many of the sequences. A lot of sequences crept into the liturgy, and they suppressed all of those, because it was just not a good idea. That is Pius X changed the observance of the calendar to a great extent, because Leo XIII had put in all these saints, and so you never saw the Sunday Mass. It was always Saint this or Saint that on Sunday.
Right. It could be said St. Pius X made Sundays great again, Your Excellency.
Yeah, he made Sundays great again. And so that's an example of the church pruning and doing things that. So the idea of going back to the early church as if everything was perfect implies that corruption followed afterwards. This is all corrupt, medieval and Baroque corruption. And that's what they thought, those modernist
really
liturgists.
believed that.
Yes, and we have to strip it down. And the reason they wanted to strip it all down was because the medieval developments and the Baroque developments, if you want to call it that, were too dogmatic.
Explicitly underline our beliefs.
Yes.
Father Carlos Braga, right hand of Bugnini, and for many years leader of the famous liturgical review Ephemerides Liturgicae, boldly describes the reform of Holy Saturday as a, quote, battering ram which broke into the fortress of our then too static liturgy.
Yes. That says it all.
I mean, what an endorsement for the new Holy Week, Your Excellency.
Yes.
It's a battering ram which breaks into the fortress of the then too static liturgy. I think we can parse that, Your Excellency. For the modernists, static is bad.
Yes.
A static liturgy, it's not growing. It's not evolving as a person.
Right. Just as dogma must evolve, which is a heresy.
Then can be understood the crucial importance of this reform. This, quote, reform made under Pius XII had no other goal than to subtly prepare minds for the liturgical revolution that occurred after Pius XII, notably the new Mass of Paul VI. This, quote, reform was thus the wedge that allowed the oak to be cut down. It was only once the oak had been cut down, once the, quote, bastard Mass was promulgated, that many attentive minds understood what was hidden behind the oddities of the 1955 reform.
Yes.
And that's what you talked about, Your Excellency. In hindsight, it's very obvious.
Yes.
When it's happening, not so obvious.
Yes, you just get something from Rome, and you get a new book, and this is the Holy Week we follow. I mean, there was not a lot of questioning of it, at least in a popular level. And you see, and then you get to the point of, well, he's a reigning pontiff, and his law still stands. I would respond to that. He's first that he's not a reigning pontiff now; he's a deceased pontiff. All right, and the see is vacant now. You see, so there is no true pope at the present time. So what prevails then is a principle known as epikeia, and that is, if we were to have a true Roman pontiff at this time, what would he tell us to do? And that must be based on reason. Because you can't, again, my analogy, Merkelbach gives the famous moral theologian. If a novice saw a book on a shelf that he needed, and he couldn't get in touch with his novice master for permission to buy it, by epikeia he could buy it because it's reasonable that the superior would say yes. But if on the way home he spots a yellow Ferrari, and he thinks, I'd like to buy this yellow Ferrari, would the superior say yes? Vow of poverty. Would he say yes? The answer is no. See, so epikeia must be based on reason. You see, so if a law can become harmful with time, see, like laws of fasting during war or something like that, or all sorts of. That's why there must be a constant vigilance in the church, a constant government in the church, because laws can become harmful. The observance of the law can become harmful. So, in light of all of what is said there and in other great works about the New Holy Week, it is clear that it was the path to all the reform, and the same characters that which produced that, the New Holy Week of 1955, also produced the new Mass and everything else that we consider horrid.
Well, and we do have precedent in church history, Your Excellency, for faithful resisting liturgical reforms and not being censored for it. We have the Ambrosian Rite. We have other, people like their liturgy, and they weren't punished for liking their liturgy. Usually the church accommodated that love for the liturgy.
Well, to excuse the people of Milan, they had a right to retain their right because it was more than 200 years old. It was from St. Ambrose. And and Pius V said merely that you could take this if you want. And St. Charles Borromeo, very devoted to St. Pius V, said, I want to put the Roman Mass in the cathedral. Well, the people rioted they want no part of that Roman Mass. They're going to keep the Ambrosian Rite. So the Ambrosian Rite continued in Milan. I mean, it's the Novus Ordo now, but it did continue in Milan. Yes.
So we don't have time to talk about each aspect of the Holy Week changes, so I just wanted to pick a couple to talk about with His Excellency so that you can get a sense of it. And as I say, it's a short pamphlet, so you'll be able to read it yourself. The new Holy Week invented an unveiled, this is on Good Friday, invented an unveiled procession cross, while the altar cross remained veiled. During 2 weeks, the altar cross has to remain veiled. Even veiled, it is revered through incense, genuflections, or profound bowings. It is forbidden to unveil it under any pretense. On the contrary, the procession cross is held unveiled at the procession. At the beginning and at the end of said procession, 2 crosses are seen, one veiled and the other unveiled. How can we make sense of this? This could only be a liturgical error, attributable to the hastiness of the reformers. Since the procession cross is nothing but an altar cross that moves, the 2 crosses should be veiled in violet. But because of the liturgy of the day, the procession cross holds a blessed branch in reference to the victory of Christ on the cross.
Yes, obviously it makes no sense, and you can tell that it was cooked up.
I mean, just the sloppiness of it, Your Excellency.
Yes, that alone, no, it's the odor of Bugnini, and you have to pronounce that correctly, is all over it. And once you have done the traditional rite, you cannot go back to that rite.
You can't unsee what you
it is there. It is so pungent. It's right in your face.
The new Holy Week also removed the cross knocking on the closed doors of the church at the end of the procession. Indeed, when the procession arrives at the closed doors, a dialogue starts between 2 cantors who previously entered in the church, standing behind the closed doors, and the procession which stays outside. The cantors sing the famous refrain of the hymn of St. Theodulf of Orleans, Gloria Laus et Honor, a very beautiful sequence, Your Excellency. Once the hymn is finished, the subdeacon hits the door of the church with the pole of the cross. The door then opens and lets the procession go inside, while the response Ingrediente Domino in Sanctam Civitatem is sung. This rite symbolizes the initial resistance of the Jewish people, then the triumphal entry of Christ in Jerusalem, as well as the triumphal cross of Jesus Christ, which opens the doors of heaven and causes our resurrection. The meaning of this rite was profound and magnificent. By the wood of the cross, the redeemed people could finally enter heaven, the house of God.
Yes, it's the significance of it. Yeah, that was all suppressed.
But what's nice is, Your Excellency, if you're in the SSPX, you get to keep this.
Yes, because one of the rectors of the seminary thought it was a good idea. I remember that.
But that's what happens when you play, I suppose, buffet with the liturgy. You take what you want
Yes.
and get rid of what you don't want.
Yes.
Your Excellency, he also brings up this famous discussion of perfidies in the liturgy. And also, I found out about this so-called group, Friends of Israel, which I had not known about prior to reading this pamphlet. Thanks to a clever piece of propaganda as early as 1928, the quote, Friends of Israel, which constituted 2,000 priests, 328 bishops, and 19 cardinals. Friends of Israel, Your Excellency, is just fascinating to me, petitioned Pope Pius XI in order to remove the word perfidies from the prayer of Good Friday. Pius XI submitted this problem to the Congregation of Rites. One of its members, the famous Ildefonso Schuster, who will later become Cardinal Archbishop of Milan, was in favor of the removal, arguing that the meaning of perfidies had changed in modern languages. He claimed that the word could be understood in the modern sense of wicked or iniquitous. But the Latin and liturgical sense of the word perfidies is the only proper term to designate the faithlessness of the Jews. The Jews are neither heretics, because they have not been baptized, nor infidels, because they have received the revelation. The term perfidious thus refers to their very special kind of infidelity, an infidelity to their own law and their own covenant, through refusing to recognize the true Messiah. The Jews being bound to God by a covenant and a contract, their infidelity is then a true perfidy, a true wickedness, and a true iniquity. The word perfidious in Latin precisely refers to someone who did not respect a covenant or a contract, hence the idea of a certain perjury.
Yes, you have to distinguish between the Latin word perfidus and perfidious in English. It is true that in English it has undergone, or the cognate in English, because cognates don't always agree. French and English have plenty of cognates, as you probably know. That means where the word sounds the same in both languages. But you could say some awful things in French if you used English cognates and vice versa. So you can't always go by cognates. What he said is true. Perfidious really is too strong. If you look up in a Latin dictionary, perfidus means someone who is not faithful to his oath. You see, so
An oath breaker.
You see, fides means faith. You see, and so yeah, an oath breaker. And if you understand that, that's what there was a covenant between the Jewish people and God. You see that there was you might say an agreement, and that is what they violated, and that's why they have a special term. In other words, you have so I think the term unfaithful would be better in order to avoid that bad connotation of English perfidious or perfide in French, or it just has taken on a different idea. So unfaithful or some other word that would and Pius XII pointed out that it meant unfaithful in the special sense that it applies to Jews, because what the priest is saying there is true. They're not infidels like Muslims. They're not heretics like Protestants. So where are they? They are violators of this sacred trust that was given to them by God by not receiving the Messiah.
It's a special category, as you noted.
Yes.
In spite of this, in 1928, the Sacred Congregation of Rites agreed to remove the word perfidies from the prayer for the conversion of Jews. Fortunately, the Holy Office responded that the prayer was so ancient that we ought not to change it, and that if such a change was made, we would face a bottomless pit. So we have two congregations disagreeing, Your Excellency. Moreover, Cardinal Mary del Val, Secretary of the Holy Office and of St. Pius X, opposed it even more violently and accused the Friends of Israel of not really seeing the conversion of Jews as necessary. He added that the word perfidious of the ancient rite expresses the horror inspired by the treason and revolt of the Jews. The sentence of the Holy Office was therefore nihil esse innovandum, nothing shall be changed. Pius XI approved that decision and dissolved by decree the Association of the Friends of Israel.
Yes, that was something that should have been dissolved. Yes, it's just it's an early modernism. You see that has blossomed into what we have now, and that is the Jews have no need to convert; they have their own path to God.
Yeah, and a Catholic Friends of Israel would be basically a funnel to get them converted.
It should be, yes.
Right.
I mean, Friends of Israel. The truth is the greatest charity.
How can we bring you to Catholicism?
Right. Yes. No. He probably saw it as an ecumenical movement that was right around the same time as the encyclical against Mortalium Animos.
I mean,
against
1928, Your Excellency.
Yes, I know. No, the Vatican II was the blooming of the stinking flower. It was not, did not happen overnight. The plant had been growing for a long time.
Eugenio Maria Zoli, who was known as Israel Zoli before his conversion to Catholicism in 1945 and used to be the great rabbi of Rome, also petitioned Pius XII for the removal of the word perfidious from the liturgy of Good Friday, which is fascinating. He's converted from Judaism, but this is still apparently bothering him. Pius XII refused and explained to Zoli that the adjective perfidious, which means in common language disloyal, traitor, or liar, shall be understood as faithless in the context of Catholic prayers.
Yes, the Latin is one thing, the English is another. You can't say that they're just it's two different things. When I wrote that article, a Jewish man called me up, whom I still know, and he said, I heard you wrote this article, and I think he was a little ticked by it. And I said to him, I explained the whole thing to him, but I said, would you want the Roman Catholic Church dictating to you and your synagogue what your liturgy should be? He said no.
And you said, my point.
That it's just not the place of Jews to be, asking us to change our sacred liturgy. And just as they would be very offended if we thought perhaps they should have a prayer to the Savior Christ, the Messiah, just for the sake of ecumenism.
I mean, we're obviously watchers and listeners. We're laughing about it because it's so patently ridiculous.
Yes.
Not only because it's them
Yes.
and they would never concede such a point, but
Yes.
I think it just shows you're actually creeping from 1928 to Benedict XVI, this desire of Jewry to not allow Catholics to be Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
You must bend to our will because you're making us quote unquote uncomfortable, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'm going to talk about today, Erickson, just some practical issues. Domberto, no modernist, no one would accuse him of modernism, wanted to address the practical issue of the timing of the vigil. The ancient rite, according to him, was a liturgical anomaly in the Latin rite due to it happening in the morning, while by definition a vigil is supposed to be a night office. Therefore, there is no possible theoretical justification to this liturgical anomaly, he said, but only a historical explanation or human sloth. Moreover, Holy Saturday is by nature an aliturgical day. It is therefore a disorder to celebrate a Mass of the Resurrection on Saturday morning, when historically and mystically, Jesus was in the grave. But Father Rioult answers, if a Mass of the Resurrection is absurd on Holy Saturday because his body was in the grave, isn't it also absurd to celebrate a Mass of the Resurrection at midnight and then another Mass of the Resurrection at 10, since Christ resurrected does not die again? Christ is not historically resurrected twice on Easter Sunday. Why two different offices for the same mystery? This new pastoral direction also generated a certain liturgical confusion with the double communion at midnight and in the day, a confusion that is in contradiction with Catholic law since the daily Eucharistic bread can be received only once a day. Hence, Canon 857, it is not licit for anyone to receive the Most Holy Eucharist who has received it already on the same day.
Yeah, the Holy Saturday it is so the whole Easter is so laden with things to say and do that it cannot be done really in one ceremony. And I think that's why the Church separated them. The original vigil started in the late afternoon in Rome and went all the way into the early morning. See, and you stood all the way through it. and that's when they would do the baptisms in Rome. You see, and they would everyone. These are adult baptisms, which take a long, long time, and they would do all the long lessons both in Latin and in Greek, and everybody was standing around. And the baptistry is still there, and.
Are you referring to the Constantinian baptistry, Your Excellency?
The one
at
that's
the Lateran?
yes,
so beautiful.
Yes, that was the way. So then the Easter part of it, the resurrection part of it occurred on Sunday morning, exactly when our Lord rose. Our Lord did not rise at midnight. He rose on Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and the Jews did not consider midnight as the change of the day, as we do. So it makes no sense either to have. It's like it's like Christmas in April,
right?
Midnight mass, and also so you have that all of the symbolism of baptism in the Holy Saturday, and the baptismal water as the blood of Christ, etc. It's loaded with all of the symbolism of baptism, which cannot be conveniently done on a Sunday morning. I mean, it is so much. The Holy Saturday commemorates you might say the rising of Christ, the act of rising of Christ, whereas Sunday commemorates Christ risen. You see, and the effects of the resurrection of Christ. You see, so it's really two different things that are being done there. But Holy Saturday is a drama, you might say, of all sorts of symbolism, the candle, everything. I mean, it would take me hours to go through it.
Right.
But so they are two things that could conveniently be separated. You would be at Mass on Sunday morning for about 5 or 6 hours otherwise, right? And also the midnight mass kills off, as the Christmas midnight mass does too. It kills off attendance at Mass at the next day. You see, people go to the midnight mass, they stay up until 2:00, and then they sleep in the next day. See, so it kills off the solemn liturgical functions of either Christmas Day or the. If I were the bishop of the diocese, I would say you can go to midnight mass, but it does not fulfill your Sunday obligation. That was all up to the bishop of the diocese.
Well, and obviously you're speaking with your experience, Your Excellency, over many decades of what people do in the practical order.
Right.
But I think obviously
they stay in bed.
We would
the
hope
greatest feast of the whole year.
We would hope that on one of the 2 times of the year that the church allows multiple masses to the priest, and that the beauty of the liturgy gives you different masses for those
Yes.
for those occasions, that you would take that opportunity to go and to celebrate with our Lord.
Yes.
I think one of the things that I didn't realize until the conjunction of reading this booklet along with experiencing it myself was that the Vigil of Pentecost was another casualty, a sort of hidden casualty of this,
yes.
and how similar it is to the Holy Saturday Vigil.
It is. It's a reduced Holy Saturday, and the reason was that those who did not pass the test on Holy Saturday got baptized on
right,
Pentecost.
These people went to the summer school, the sessions to get ready for Pentecost.
So you should understand that the church at that time, in the early church, only did public baptisms on those 2 days. That is Holy Saturday and the Vigil of Pentecost, and did private baptisms only in danger of death. So you had to wait. And so if you didn't make it on Holy Saturday, you would make it again on. So if they want to go back to the early church where they start at late afternoon on Saturday and stand all the way through and until Sunday morning.
In Latin and in Greek.
In Latin and in Greek, if they want to do that, fine.
You approve of that, Your Excellency.
Well, that's going back to the early church, and to endure all of that. It's hard enough to endure as it is when you're sitting in a comfortable pew. It's a long ceremony, and it's even for the priest. It's the longest ceremony in the whole book, in the whole missal.
Your explanation, Your Excellency, I think underlines the fact you say that the church accrues wisdom in her liturgy, and then she looks at what has been done in the practical order. And when you lose the ceremony of thousands of adults getting baptized on Easter, because that's how it was, that wasn't how the church matured.
Right.
So now you've detached this. Well, then inevitably that ceremony starts to drift forward, especially as people say, well, I'd like to celebrate Easter
Right.
instead of waiting. And so it drifts away from that. And over time, we have it that it was celebrated in the morning,
Yes.
and that the fast lasts until noon. Is that right?
Noon in the traditional.
And so people have to look at the fact that this was a wedge that people used. Oh, well, why are you celebrating Easter Vigil in the morning? And what they were ignoring was all of these historical facts, what had happened in the church, and how the church deals with changes over time.
Also, the tradition of the church is that first Vespers is the beginning of the feast. So in any case, you would have had the first Vespers of Easter on Holy Saturday around 5 p.m. So you have all the Alleluias, all of that.
And then at midnight,
Yeah, I mean, that came from the Jews. The starting of they still observe that at sundown of the day before. That's Vespers, you see, and then the feast is the next day. The church observes that too. So you would have had some liturgy, if the vigil had not been there. So that's why you end the Holy Saturday with Vespers.
well, Your Excellency, so this falls under a recommend for you, this
It's a
pamphlet?
very good little book. It's easy to read. You can read it in about an hour. And there's a lot of things in there I didn't know. And very good.
So there'll be a link in the description below to a page where you can buy this, and a portion of the proceeds from that sale will go to the seminary. Your Excellency, as always, thanks for taking the time to talk with us about this.
Not at all.